And you won't. They've changed the settings. All right. My name is Courtney. I'm the education programmer with BC and PHA, and I'll be here in the background today, just doing some tech support, monitoring the chat, kind of all of those things. If you have any questions throughout, please pop them in the chat. Or if you are having any connection sort of things and you can't find the chat, you can just like wave aggressively in the camera or pop up a reaction or something, just something to get my attention, and we'll do our very best to help you. But otherwise, I will pass things over to Jessica, who's going to start us off this morning.
Thank you, Courtney. I am going to share my screen. Are you seeing it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There she is. She's got you.
Great. Okay. So, morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jessica. I'm a senior strategic advisor for sustainability and resilience at BC Housing. And today is our second session in the BC Nonprofit Housing Climate and Disaster Resilience webinar series, where we're trying to give a practical introduction to disaster and climate risk in a housing context. Today's session is on heat preparedness, and we've got a really great lineup of speakers joining us. I would like to gratefully acknowledge that at BC Housing, we work on the traditional and unceded territories of hundreds of Indigenous people throughout the province. I'm grateful to be joining you today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I'd also like to acknowledge the collaboration behind this whole webinar series. It's been a joint effort between BC and PHA, AMA, BC Housing, the province of BC. We've got someone today from Vancouver Coastal Health. And I just want to thank everyone on the screen who's helped shape the series. And we've got a lot more coming in as we go along. There's sort of a lot of expertise across this group, and we're really pleased to be bringing people together to share knowledge, tools, approaches, and that sort of thing. So, just by way of context, I think everyone here is already very aware that disaster and climate impacts are increasing across BC. A lot of these headlines are no longer hypothetical future risks. They're very much becoming part of the operating environment that housing providers are already trying to manage. And the question is really less so, is this happening, and more, how do we start planning? How do we start building preparedness and resilience in practical ways? And this webinar series is really aiming to explore this. So, the purpose of our whole series is threefold. The first is to share approaches around preparedness and planning and resilience, recognizing that organizations are all sort of at different stages. The second is to connect housing providers to tools, to resources, to expertise, and sort of to each other. And then third, to help build awareness of sort of emerging climate and disaster risks across BC and what they might mean for housing providers. This series and this work for all of us working in the housing space is evolving. We definitely don't have all the answers, but we're hoping this series sort of starts helping provide practical next steps and approaches for the nonprofit housing sector. Here's a topic overview of the series. We started our series off with a broad provincial overview. We had a few colleagues from the province come and speak about the provincial disaster and climate risk assessment work. And today's session is on heat preparedness. In the coming months, the series is going to go deeper into more practical housing focused topics. We've got a great session on wildfire and smoke coming up. We've got a session on resilient neighborhoods. We've got a really great session with some colleagues from Italy, Canada, who are going to come in and show us sort of free tools to leverage to assess future climate risks. So please keep an eye out if any of this interests you going forward. So, just quickly on the agenda today, we've started with a welcome and series overview. I'm then going to hand over to our three great speakers who will speak on heat preparedness, and we'll close out the session hopefully with around 10 to 15 minutes of discussion and question time. Would love to hear from all of you. I'm now going to hand things over to Edward Beckett, who is a building energy manager at BCN PHA. Take it away, Edward.
Thanks, Jessica. Should all see my screen that's up now. And thanks to you, Jessica, and thanks to everyone joining us today for this timely discussion on heat preparedness for nonprofit housing. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that at BCMPHA, our work takes place on the ancestral lands and unceded territories of more than 200 First Nations throughout British Columbia. For today's event, we're presenting from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish nations who have lived on and stewarded the land since time immemorial. We're grateful to be here and acknowledge the ongoing relationship between Indigenous people and these lands. So let's look at our agenda for today. I'm really excited to have Megan Straight from Vancouver Coastal Health start us off with a look at the impacts of heat-related illnesses and the demographics most at risk. We'll share existing tools and resources that can help you prepare for future heat events. Christopher will then show us some practical actions that can reduce indoor temperatures during extreme heat events. And we'll finish off with some more mid to long-term items showing examples of retrofits and nonprofit housing sites that will keep units cool and funding sources to complement these projects. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, and at the end, we'll have some time for you to share your heat-related concerns and ask questions. So Chris and I are members of BCMPHA's asset management team. Our asset management team helps advance BCMPHA's mission to support safe, secure, and affordable housing for everyone. We support nonprofit housing providers through advocacy, education, and hands-on coaching, helping them plan, prioritize, and manage their buildings more effectively. Our team of energy specialists and managers, along with our data team, support the delivery of energy studies and opportunity assessments that can help societies identify retrofit opportunities. These opportunities may provide energy and cost savings, but also additional health benefits, as we'll see today. And we also do our best to help with the hardest part, access to funding for retrofit projects. Through our coaching services, we help housing providers identify funding opportunities and then support them through the key stages of the retrofit journey, from early development to implementation. And now I'll pass it over to Megan to discuss the health implications of extreme heat.
Great. Thanks, Edward. Nice to be joining you all today. I just wanted to situate things a little bit here. So I come from a public health team with Vancouver Coastal Health. My name is Megan Straight, and I'm an analyst with our team. And for folks on the line, we work on more the community health side of things, looking at environmental factors that impact our health. So how things like air quality, water quality, and climate-related events can impact our health. And if you're looking at this map here, Vancouver Coastal Health is the red area on the map. And we also work quite closely with public health teams across the province, and a lot of this messaging is aligned across health authorities. So if you're in a different health region within the province, a lot of this will be similar messaging for your area. Next slide, thanks. So as Jessica mentioned, we're seeing these climate impacts happening more often across the province. So coming up into the summer, we're hearing about potentially hotter temperatures, where we have a bit more drought going on, and we're also concerned about wildfire risks as well. So this is an opportunity for us to prepare, and hopefully we won't have to experience too many of these events over the summer, but if we do, we'll have some tools in our back pocket. Next slide, thanks. So first of all, extreme heat. What is it? That's the new fancy term for heat waves. And a lot of people hear about heat domes. That was the weather event that caused the 2021 heat dome in BC. And I think most of us are familiar with that event now. Unfortunately, there was at least 619 people who passed away in 1 week. So extreme heat is really the leading cause of death and illness from extreme weather in Canada. And we're really trying to learn from that event and prevent these deaths from happening again in the future. So this is our extreme heat poster. It's translated into multiple languages. And it's a really helpful tool to have in first aid kits at the front desk. It goes through the symptoms of heat-related illness. On the left-hand side is the more common symptoms that can be treated with trying to cool someone off, getting them out of that hot space, and trying to give them lots of water. If they're not getting better, or if they're having those more severe symptoms of heat stroke on the right-hand side, that's really when we're seeking emergency services. So calling 911, trying to get to the hospital, and once again, trying to cool that person off as fast as possible. And if able to, getting them out of that hot space while we're doing that. Yeah, so this is a helpful one to check out. Next slide, thanks. We've also learned a lot since the heat dome about what contributed to people passing away. At least 98% of the people who died during the heat dome were indoors in a residence. So it's really those high indoor temperatures that we're most concerned about. I think when it's hot out, a lot of us think about trying to go inside to get out of the heat, but it's those indoor spaces that are one of the greatest risks during a heat wave. We also learned that about 56% of the people who passed away were socially isolated. So, not having someone to check in with you, maybe to support you to go somewhere cooler and see how you're doing can be a risk factor during these events. Other things are other folks that are at higher risk from heat potentially are older adults. As we get older, our body's ability to manage extreme temperatures and different environmental factors can be impacted. Older adults may also be less able to recognize or feel thirsty. So they may think that they're fine and they're not too thirsty, but they're actually getting dehydrated. Folks with health conditions and certain medications can put them at higher risk from heat, how they manage heat, for example. Mental illness as well. Unfortunately, there was a larger percentage of people with schizophrenia who passed away during the heat dome, and that they're trying to understand more why that is. Part of it has to do with medications that can impact how we manage heat. Also, people with schizophrenia may be less aware that they're getting overheated or maybe more socially isolated because of stigma around this. Using substances, including alcohol, can impact how we manage heat. Limited mobility, people may be less able to get out of the heat and go somewhere cooler. And people experiencing homelessness or marginal housing may be outside and more exposed to hot temperatures. Same with people who are working or living in hot spaces. They're in those hot indoor spaces or outdoor spaces. And people who are pregnant, infants, and young children, once again, their bodies are in a stage that's less able to manage the heat potentially. Next slide, thanks. So let's flip over to wildfire smoke quickly before we dive into it. What is wildfire smoke? It's a combination of tiny particles and gases, and its composition can change greatly depending on what's being burned, where it's being burned. For example, if trees are burning, it's going to be a different composition than if a house is burning. And it's going to change as it travels over the oceans and sounds and across the province. But the biggest health concern from wildfire smoke are these tiny particles called PM 2.5. But the reason they're a concern is because they're small enough to go into our lungs and even our bloodstream when we breathe in smoke. And that can cause inflammation and other health impacts that I'll mention in a moment. This is our wildfire smoke poster, and similar to the heat one, it's translated. It's a helpful one to have in first aid kits and to reference throughout the summer. The symptoms on the left-hand side are the more common ones. These are probably things that we've all experienced during a smoke event, right? Our eyes get a bit burny, we maybe get a bit of a cough. These are best managed by trying to get out of the smoke, go inside, and find cleaner air. The more severe symptoms on the right-hand side, it's pretty common sense. If you're having trouble breathing, if you're having chest pain, going to emergency services and getting treatment for that as soon as possible. Next slide, thanks. So these are the folks that may be at higher risk from wildfire smoke. We kind of divide it between two different categories. The category on the left-hand side is folks that are more physically at risk from wildfire smoke. So people who have existing health conditions, especially lung conditions, infants and young children, and pregnant people, mainly because during these stages of life, the body is going through so much growth and changes that there's greater risk of impacts. And older adults may be less able to manage those extreme changes in the environment as well. Um, and on the right-hand side are people who may be more exposed to wildfire smoke. So people who don't have housing, for example, may be out in the smoke more or may experience stigma trying to go into a space to get out of the smoke. People who are living without air filtration systems, which is really a lot of us in the province historically, right? A lot of us don't have air filtration, and we'll talk about ways to increase that, and the people who are work or active outdoors. Because they're out in the smoke more. We're also learning more about longer term health impacts from wildfire smoke. So there's growing research around impacts to heart and lung disease, also brain health, so rates of dementia, and also impacts to pregnant people, growing babies, infants, and young children. So we're really trying to get the word out to young families. There's impacts on, say, birth weights and childhood asthma rates. So if you have any littles in your life, we're hoping you can help us share some of this information as well and ways that we can protect ourselves from smoke. Next slide, thanks. So here are some of the environmental risk factors in housing that can impact our heat risk. So being on the top floor, obviously heat rises, or if you're under the roof where all that sun game comes onto the building, that can impact how hot our space gets. Large windows, especially single pane windows, if the windows face south or west, those spaces are going to heat up more. So even within a building, there may be certain units that are going to get hotter than others, which I'm sure you folks are very familiar with. You're familiar with your own buildings. Protective features on the other side, things like green space, trees can help absorb a lot of the heat in a neighborhood or even shade a building. Air conditioning and heat pumps, obviously, if we can access those, they're great. And then depending on the orientation of the building, it might be cooler as well. Next slide, thanks. So I just want to highlight, we talk about indoor temperatures being one of the greatest risks during heat waves, but what are we looking for? What are those temperatures? 26 degrees Celsius and over is where we're seeing an increasing risk of heat-related illness, especially for people who are at higher risk. So if you're seeing those temperatures on a thermostat or in a unit, that's really those sort of like reminder to start looking at ways to cool that space off or finding that person a cooler space to go to. 31 degrees or higher is a significant risk of heat-related illness. It's really getting dangerously hot in that space, and we want that person going somewhere cooler if they haven't already, especially someone who's at higher risk. We're going to talk about some great passive ways to cool a space off. Just a note that generally speaking, these might cool a space by a couple of degrees. So if you're looking at those temperatures and say it's 38 degrees in their space, using passive measures can be helpful, but it may only get it to 36, and that's still too hot in that space. So just keeping that in mind. Fans, we're learning more about this since the heat dome. Fans are a great tool. Put them in the window to blow cool air into the space, but over 33 degrees, fans can actually heat us up and act like a convection oven, and they just basically blow hot air onto us. So we want to try to move away from using fans as the main way to cool our bodies off. And just to note that the Residential Tenancy Act has been updated, so building owners and landlords can prohibit the use of air conditioning, but it may be determined to be unconscionable if it constitutes a health risk. Next slide, thanks. So I just wanted to share a study here that was done with us in partnership with City of Vancouver and the BC Centre for Disease Control, and it was asking people how hot is your space getting. So this is a map of City of Vancouver. Those tiny triangles are indoor temperatures. Red triangles are 31 degrees, blue are 26, and yellow is in between. I like this because it shows us that we're seeing those hot temperatures all across the city. And if people are familiar with Vancouver, that sort of concentration in the top there is downtown. So we're definitely seeing higher higher temperatures in that downtown area where we have that urban heat effect, lots of concrete and, metal and hot buildings that don't have as many trees around. But we're also seeing hot temperatures in spaces that have green space that may be cooler looking neighborhoods. So the big takeaway here is that we really want to be checking the temperatures inside of our buildings because even cooler neighborhoods may have a unit that's got the orientation or some of those risk factors that we talked about that might heat up that space. Next slide, thanks. So looking at wildfire smoke, often our messaging is to get inside, get out of the smoke, but we're learning more about how well those buildings keep the smoke out. So at Vancouver Coastal Health, we've been putting air quality monitors around our region, both inside and outside of buildings to try to compare how much smoke is between the two and how much smoke is getting inside of that building. Um, this is a great graphic from our colleagues at the National Center for Environmental Health, and they've run these scenarios with the evidence available to try to understand on average how much do these different scenarios keep smoke out. So the first one is windows open. If we just close our windows, there is about, on average, an 8% less smoke inside that room. So it's less smoke than being outside, but it's not as much as we would hope. If we close the windows and we add a portable air cleaner, it's about 71% less smoke inside. So that's significantly lower, which is why we're really trying to find ways for more people to have filtered indoor air. Next slide, thanks. So how do we do that? How do we have cleaner indoor air? There's a couple different steps to this. So the first thing is ventilation. We want to limit the amount of smoke getting into the building. So typical HVAC settings do not keep out smoke. So if you think about COVID, we were trying to increase a lot of that ventilation, bring the air in, but a lot of those settings and features work against us when there's wildfire smoke. So we're trying to adjust those HVAC settings to reduce that smoke from coming inside, trying to keep windows and doors closed and find ways to maintain that ventilation and keep the pressure in the building positive. Next slide, thanks. We also want to look at once we've tried to stop the smoke from coming in, how do we clean the air that's left inside? So I'd want to have at least a minimum of MERV 13 filtration. And just a note that a lot of heat pumps and furnace filters in BC, most of them aren't able to use MERV 13. So we might need to look at adding that additional filtration from a portable air cleaner, like a HEPA filter, or there's also DIY air cleaner options. And we want to be, if possible, monitoring that indoor air quality to see how low we're able to get those smoke levels. Next step slide, thanks. This is just a note that there's a couple of different resources if you're trying to plan how to manage smoke and heat in your buildings. I've linked them all here, and these slides will be shared later. And of course, Edward and Craig have lots of different, and Chris, sorry, have lots of different examples after me. But there's ASHRAE guidance and EPA guidance. And then our VCH Childcare and Schools document has a really good section here on how to make a plan for your building. And it goes through different ways to look at ventilation and filtration if you're trying to figure out how to manage smoke in your spaces. And we also have a whole bunch of different resources that you can share with tenants during these events. And we're really trying to encourage neighbors helping neighbors, which Chris has a lot of information about as well. Next slide, thanks. So if we remember nothing else from all the things I've said, what are the most important things that we want you to remember about heat and smoke? So for heat, we really hope that you share that indoor temperatures are the greatest risk during heat waves. So if in doubt, we want people to go somewhere cooler and really try to keep an eye on how hot that space is getting. The second thing is we want to find a heat buddy. So encouraging people to check in with one another. Things like health conditions, age, if we're using substances or have certain medications may impact if people recognize they're getting overheated or dehydrated. So if we're checking in with someone, just asking, hey, how you're doing, they may say, oh, I'm fine, but it's actually getting too hot in their space. So if we're checking in with someone, also asking, hey, what's the temperature on your thermostat? Hey, how many glasses of water have you had? Looking at some of those more measurable things to try to check how they're doing. The third thing is we want everyone to have a plan for heat. These Prepared BC guides I'm showing here are super helpful. They've walked through how to plan for the heat, and they're available in multiple languages. If you want free printed handouts, you can email Prepared BC and they will mail you printed handouts. They're probably sick of me telling everyone that. Next slide, thanks. For wildfire smoke, these are the top 3 messages that we hope you take away. There's both short-term and those longer-lasting health impacts that we're concerned about. So trying to raise awareness about the impacts of wildfire smoke. And the best way to protect your health is to spend time in filtered indoor air. So trying to use a portable air cleaner with a HEPA filter, or building a DIY air cleaner at home, or spending time in public spaces that have air filtration. And I know that you're like, well, how do I know if the library has a good HVAC system? I don't know HVAC systems, or maybe you guys do, but I don't as much. But the tip here is to look for large public buildings that have air conditioning, because they're the most likely to have filtered indoor air. So thinking ahead of the season, where are those spaces within your community that you can be directing tenants to? And finally, trying to figure out how you can check the local air quality and the air quality health index throughout the day. Wildfire smoke can change quickly over time and space and throughout the day. So checking back regularly to try to decide when it's better to go out and do some of those errands outdoors. Next slide, thanks. So these are the weather resources. So Environment Canada has a whole bunch of different options here. There's weather alerts online. There's a smartphone app. There's a telephone system. If you're outside of urban areas, aqmap.ca is my favorite one-stop shop, because it has those government air quality monitoring stations that mainstream weather services use, but they also use all the monitors that VCH and other health partners and community partners have put out. So they add more accurate local information for neighborhoods that may be further away from the government stations. Like Sunshine Coast, for example, your closest government station's up in Squamish. So looking at these local ones can provide more accurate information. Next slide, thanks. And finally, these are all those resources that I mentioned. I'll just point out the ones I haven't talked about. So portable air cleaners, how to choose one is a really helpful guide. People have gone to buy an air cleaner, for example, and then found out that you can't get the filters in Canada. So there's a few things to keep in mind if you're looking at trying to buy one. And then protect yourself from wildfire smoke. That postcard goes through all the steps of how to check your local air quality. And then on the back, it has actions to take during smoke. All of these are available on our websites listed here. Thanks. Next slide. And there's a whole bunch of staff resources. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just so you're aware that they're out there. There's information on cooling and cleaner airspaces, how to plan for heat and smoke, info for building owners and operators, how to do a check-in with tenants, neighbor actions, and then of course, WorkSafe BC. Next slide, thanks. Great, and I'll pass it over to Chris. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Megan. Yes, as has just been all described, and as we're very aware, extreme heat events, they're increasingly more common. So heat resilience is quite clearly becoming a key priority in the nonprofit housing sector, and that's kind of why we're all here today. I suppose a few elements with BCMPHA as our role as ambassadors for the sector. We have in our strategic energy management plan, we identified resident safety and building resilience as key needs in response to the changing climate. And just generally in our conversations with the societies we work with, increasingly we're just hearing things like cooling, thermal comfort, indoor heat safety. These are all growing priorities for the societies we support. So I just, as part of this presentation, I want to show just a few practical strategies, resources, and retrofit opportunities that can help prepare buildings and residents for extreme heat. So just the next slide there, please. Yes, as we know, sorry, it hasn't changed. There we go. Yes, indoor temperatures are the most dangerous part of extreme heat events. So when it comes to these sort of heat dome events and extreme heat events and heat waves, being prepared for the event is a crucial aspect of staying safe. And again, Megan has already highlighted a lot of these resources, but I'm just going to show you a few tips that both the society and the tenants can utilize. So yeah, next slide, please. So yes, as I've stressed, being prepared will help mitigate the dangerous impacts of extreme heat events. So yes, this is one of the most important elements, and Megan has already stressed this as well. So understanding things like when the heat is actually coming, when the extreme heat event is occurring, knowing your residents' needs, and having a proper support system in place will make a significant difference, and can, and certainly as we've seen in the heat dome, could be the difference between life and death. The heat impacts, of course, are not the same for everyone. So identifying the residents who may be more vulnerable will allow you to provide targeted support. So yes, those older people, those people associated, isolated, and other people, just yes, the more vulnerable. Also, then knowing what parts of your building and what suites get the most heat is crucial. As for example, one side of the building could be significantly different temperature to the other, or the top of the building could be significantly, will likely be significantly warmer than the other. So knowing that element can allow you to prepare. Just generally, then yes, it is important, sorry, to make sure practical measures are ready ahead of time. So having a designated cooling space, if that's an option, which it should be in terms of just at least one cool room, bringing in additional supplies, things like water, electrolytes, cooling supplies, and then just having an existing communication plan and ensuring that any existing equipment is properly working. As well, not necessarily, but having your advertising and promoting local cooling resources, so things like shopping centres and community centres and libraries, those are could be respite spaces for your tenants if they're not necessarily in their own properties. But yes, ultimately the goal is to be proactive, support your residents before heat becomes a health and safety risk. It is kind of that simple. Um, Next slide there, please. So yes, obviously there's the side that you can provide. As part of planning ahead, it is crucial that the tenants themselves know what they expect and are prepared for, because yes, as mentioned, um, monitoring indoor conditions, the society yourselves can't necessarily do that for every suite, and that's why having an indoor thermometer is crucial. But elements, just things like knowing where to go for relief as a tenant and having essentials ready before the temperatures rise, will be crucial. Small actions can have a huge impact, and particularly for those most vulnerable. Having additional supplies ready in the home, keeping important medications accessible, and planning ahead for things like meals and hydration will contribute significantly to staying safe during the extreme heat events. Um, and then, yes, Megan has really stressed it already, but that it's crucial that tenants don't manage heat events alone. As we saw, social isolation and living alone are massive risks during extreme heat. So, staying connected with neighbors, friends, or support networks can be the difference between life and death again. So, while that's important for the society to set that up, also being as the tenant, being connected and contactable is crucial, and knowing your cooling options in advance will make a significant difference and will allow the tenants to act quickly. Next slide there, please. Oh yes, sorry. Those again, just I wanted to reiterate a lot of those resources that you can prepare for. Megan has already pretty much gone over these, but yes, just go use these and prepare your buildings and prepare your tenants, because this having these checklists will go such a long way to really staying safe during these events. Next slide there, please. I suppose then, yes, a lot of what I had been talking about was from risk to action and making sure that the residents in the society are prepared for extreme heat events in terms of during it. I think now I'm looking to more the building themselves and the steps you can take to try and keep residents safe through passive, low cost, simple measures. Um, so yes, so the next few slides, I will provide some tips and resources that you could use this summer specifically. It's very short term, to help reduce indoor temperatures. These are short measures that can help during an emergency, but crucially, these should not be considered long-term solutions, as later in the presentation, Edward will cover more effective long-term strategies that really will help with the building resilience. Next slide there, please. So yes, as I mentioned, being prepared is crucially important a way to mitigate the impacts of extreme heat events. But the following slides will show more methods to help the buildings and then for your tenants stay cool during the event and sort of in and around the event. This graphic is very simple in terms of explaining the two main actions when it comes to your properties and your buildings during warmer weather and extreme heat events. when it's hotter outside, do your best to keep the heat out, and when it's hotter inside, let that heat out. And this sort of graphic also really emphasizes the importance of having an indoor thermometer as well as knowing the outdoor temperatures, because very often these temperatures will be very different, and knowing which is which can again be the difference in terms of health and safety. Next slide there, please. So yes, these are just some very short-term, no-cost ways in which you can effectively keep the heat out of the property. The goal is keep heat out as best as possible, and that means things like closing windows and doors to prevent hot air from entering and covering windows to block direct sunlight. Even basic materials like cardboard, foil, bed sheets, tiles can make a noticeable difference by reducing solar heat gain within the suites. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can also see an example of temporary wall insulation that has been utilized in Latin America, using empty cartons to add a sort of an additional insulation barrier. And again, these are very simplistic, very low cost to basically no cost, but they should really only be utilized if no other options are available. They're very much only short-term emergency measures which can buy time and reduce risk. But as said, they shouldn't be long-term, and they can't be used as a replacement for active cooling during extreme heat. Next slide there, please. This slide sort of shows a more medium-term strategy for this summer that we would be recommending in terms of passive cooling. Things like upgrading to thermal curtains or installing window film, as they can significantly cut solar heat gain. And again, it is worth emphasizing that it's much easier to keep heat out than it is to actually move the heat out. These are pretty simplistic, but will require some level of planning in terms of getting ready for it. But just generally as well, small actions within the suite can also help to keep the temperatures within the building down. So things like turning off unnecessary lights and appliances will reduce just the amount of heat generated inside the building. You're not going to turn on your space heating during a heat dome or an extreme heat event, but even small elements of like not turning on your oven, not boiling the kettle, not using tumble dryers, but right down to simple things like a lot of older buildings still don't necessarily have LED fixtures and are using incandescent or halogen light bulbs, which are they produce a lot of heat for the light that they produce. So even just options like that will make small differences, but collectively could, as Megan sort of highlighted earlier, could bring a temperature down 1 or 2 degrees, and that could be the difference in terms of safety. Again, that there's another element as well that would need to be planned ahead, but it's also considering the building or painting the building's exterior in sort of light colors or cool coatings. And this technique's been used across the world for hundreds of years. You see it in Mediterranean countries that all the buildings are white. I know it's been utilized in New York for a lot of their urban buildings. However, this approach should maybe just be considered, as its effectiveness heavily relies upon sort of the age, the condition, and the construction elements of the building. So, and when it comes to the painting of the roofs and the building envelope, we would just stress that it's consult with a roofing or a building envelope specialist first, or come to ourselves and we can sort of point you in the right directions. Next slide there, please. So yes, those are some of the easiest ways to keep the heat out, but obviously if it becomes that the building and the suites are hotter than it is inside and outside, this typically is sort of your nighttime temperatures where it'll significantly drop. Your strategy here should be getting the hot air out as efficiently as possible. Obviously, if it's safe to do so, open windows and doors, as this will allow cooler air to enter and push warmer air out. And then, yes, additional things like create a cross breeze by opening windows on the opposite sides of a unit or a building will help move air, through the space effectively. Fans can also play an important role here, and while they aren't an effective source of active cooling per se, they can help move air by pulling cooler air in and pushing warmer air out. Strategically positioning fans in a window overnight or during cooler temperatures can really improve that airflow. Similarly, if you have a ceiling fan, make sure that it is pushing air downwards and really just circulating that cooler air and pushing warmer air out. Again, in very simple terms, the goal here is to flush out the hot air and reset indoor temperatures. And yes, I just want to sort of back up what Megan was saying, that fans should not be relied upon for those primary cooling or active cooling, as these are more, fans work better in terms of like thermal comfort and movement of air. And while they do have an impact, they cannot be relied upon as your like most effective primary cooling source. I suppose, yes, while I have sort of covered a lot of the passive and ways in which you could prepare the building to keep the temperatures down slightly, particularly in an extreme heat event, none of this will be useful or usable, because instead of without active cooling should really be your number one priority if and where possible. So if I can just go to the next slide, please. So yes, passive strategies are very effective and very helpful at keeping temperatures down to a point. But during those extreme heat events, as Megan mentioned earlier, window film isn't going to necessarily bring the temperature down from 36 to 26. Active cooling should be the priority. Passive measures, the elements that I've just explained, they are really support strategies and they will help in some ways. But as yes, active cooling is the crucial element. But like this doesn't necessarily have to be there are still short-term solutions. As simple as level, placing a fan in front of a bowl of ice could provide very short-term relief and could be the difference in an emergency per se overnight before active cooling could be installed in the property. But other elements, portable or window air conditioners, which can actively lower indoor temperatures, are becoming increasingly more important in many buildings. We recently saw that the city of New West have brought in bylaws about air conditioning, so the need to provide cooling will likely become spread across municipalities and become more of a required policy. So it's something that should really be considered. And yes, while AC units might not necessarily be in everybody's budget, there are supports available to help with the cost. I know BC Hydro provide free units for certain income qualified eligible households. And even those who don't necessarily qualify in that stage, they do also offer significant discounts for AC units. So there are options out there. But yes, just the crucial element is, so passive measures help reduce heat, but it's active cooling that will really protect your tenants. And if we can just go to the next slide, yes. As I mentioned, I have largely covered the strategies and approaches that can prepare you in the short term for this summer. These are all elements that you could bring in next week to the next 2 weeks. But I'd like to hand over to Edward, who will speak more on the long term, deep energy retrofit strategies that will help prepare your building much further into the future and be much more resilient. Thank you.
Thanks, Christopher. So when it comes to retrofit opportunities, there are many that can help address overheating and improve building resiliency. Some of these items on the slide are actively cool the space, like the heat pumps, while others are passive measures like exterior shading. Some measures provide ventilation in addition to cooling and may also have the ability to filter air. But really, it's most important that these systems work together. And it may not be practical to take on all of these items at once, but stage them and align them with your capital planning needs. So everyone's retrofit journey will look a little bit different. And in BC MPHA, we're here to help you at all stages of that retrofit journey. So let's take a look at some of these items a bit closer at some actual nonprofit housing sites. Starting with the sometimes underappreciated measure, the building envelope. So this includes your windows, insulation, and the air tightness of the building. So these are retrofits that will keep heat and smoke out. Insulation reduces heat transfer, so that means using less energy to heat in winter and less energy to cool in the summer. This leads to more stable temperatures and increased comfort to occupants. Now, windows, they transfer heat through the glass and also through drafts around the window itself. So condition and age matters. Older windows will leak air and increase heat transfer more readily than newer windows. A window's service life is typically 25 years. We can see in the photos that new windows were installed on this 1970s apartment building that had original windows until last year. Siding and insulation were also upgraded as part of this deep energy retrofit. Measures like these can be costly and disruptive to your tenants, so they need to be built into your long-term capital planning. And draft proofing, well, that's really infiltration control, reducing uncontrolled leakage through gaps and cracks in your building envelope, which will improve tenant comfort and reduce heat loss in the winter and heat gain in the summer. Draft proofing or weather sealing is more of a short-term project, and you can add products like weather stripping around doors and windows. We'll see later a no-cost program that can assist with this by providing weather stripping kits. Now, when it comes to exterior shading, as we've heard, the goal is really just to block the sun before it enters your home. And exterior shading is just that, one of the most direct ways to reduce overheating because it blocks solar gains before they enter the windows. It also improves comfort by reducing glare and radiant heat near the windows. So best candidates are west and southern exposures, large windows, top floors, and common area rooms. Implementation can be fixed with awnings or overhangs, or it can be adjustable, like exterior blinds and screens, as we see in the pictures, depending on site constraints. For whole building solutions, it may be more practical to be including this in new builds or extensive envelope retrofits. If you're creating a cooling room, you could consider adding shading to that room. Usually, it will have larger windows itself. For a quick solution, as we've heard, curtains and blinds are recommended, but at that point, they're not as effective as exterior shading because the heat's already entered your building. And on to one of the most commonly requested retrofits, and we've heard about it today, heat pumps for space heating and cooling. We have pictures here of installations of mini split heat pumps with indoor heads. For some units, though, wall-mounted through-wall heat pumps may be more practical. Heat pumps provide efficient heating and cooling. For resident health, they're one of the most effective ways to keep suites cool during extreme heat events. Proper installations and commissioning, or just simply ensuring systems are sized and installed correctly, is a key success factor with this measure. And these units are also very quiet. At times, the indoor head cannot even be heard, and the outdoor units are much quieter than those traditional AC units. So for whole building solutions, a heat pump can be connected to a central base heating system, as we'll see later on, or they can serve each tenant unit. Depending on the size, you may need multiple indoor heads for tenant units. Rebates are still available, as we'll see later on for this measure. And if a whole building solution isn't affordable at this time, you can look into creating a cooling room and installing that unit that serves the place. Last year, we did a few of those projects in the interior, and we got great feedback from the residents, including that they're now able to use the cooling rooms to do their exercises in, so they can stay cool and comfortable in the summer while doing the exercises. So indoor air quality can often be overlooked in some affordable housing units, and when it gets really hot out, wildfire smoke really compounds this issue. So ventilation systems exchange air, and in some cases, they can heat and cool as well. So in your common areas, they bring in fresh air into the system and exhaust stale air. This can be makeup air systems or rooftop units, and we'll see an example of that coming up. In these photos on this slide, they're actually heat recovery ventilators that serve tenant units. And on the right, that's for a larger building, a 10-unit MERB. So these units bring in fresh air while efficiently exhausting stale air. Now, as we've heard, filtration is what cleans the air and is part of both types of these systems above. So it's important to note that filters must be rated to filter wildfire smoke. MERV 13 filters or higher would be spec'd for this. So really a quick way to remember it, ventilation is the air we bring in and send out on purpose, and filtration is what cleans the air that goes through the filter. And infiltration, that's the air that sneaks in and out of the gaps we don't control. So really bringing it all together, this photo is a great example of a new build where multiple measures work together to improve tenant comfort during extreme heat while keeping operating costs manageable. So first, the heat pumps provide efficient heating and cooling on the roof. You can see several of these units working together. Second, the rooftop makeup air unit, that's in the top right there of the photo. Well, that provides ventilation for shared spaces, bringing fresh, cool, and filtered air. And third, those solar panels in the middle, well, they don't provide cooling, they generate electricity right when summer cooling needs are typically the highest. So this is a good example of pairing solar with many electrical pieces of equipment. So the building can add new electrical loads without increasing their operating costs as much. And finally, at the bottom, we can actually see exterior shading over the windows, and this is helping reduce overheating by blocking that direct sun before it enters through the glass. So the big takeaway is that this layered protection, shading reduces the heat coming in, heat pumps provide active, reliable cooling, and ventilation supports indoor air quality. And solar, well, that helps offset the extra electrical use. So let's take a quick look at some specific projects in the nonprofit sector that BC MPHA has supported. Rotarian Housing Society in Nacusp has 5 buildings and provides affordable housing to their residents. When I started working with them in 2021, they wanted to prioritize the replacement of their domestic hot water, but also investigate options to provide active cooling to their tenants. So we started with phase 1 and 2, 19 townhomes. Funding through Clean BC program that we'll highlight shortly took up about 2/3 of project costs, the rebate did, installing mini split heat pumps. And they developed a great relationship with their contractor, who we saw they'll put to work for more projects coming up. But it was important for this project that the tenants understood how to correctly use these new units that were installed. And the contractor worked with each tenant, and so did the society, to educate them on how to ensure the units were being used correctly. Because if not, they may not be receiving the cooling benefits that the units provide. So moving on to phase 3, this positive experience allowed them to move on to another building. Cooling again was prioritized, as was adding attic insulation, as that was below recommended levels for that climate zone, and that can be a common occurrence. So we can see the heat pumps in the outdoor in the picture there, and also solar panels to help offset their energy costs. So as we'll see in the next project, the business case for these heat pumps has gotten better because the rebates have increased from this phase 3 project. So moving on to the next project was their Rotary Villa phase 4, undertaking a series of retrofit projects across their space, water, heating, lighting, and even another solar project. And as we'll see, the rebate levels have improved for this project. So at just over 180,000 total, this reduced project costs by almost 60%. And in the upcoming slides, I'll show you the programs they use to fund these measures at such great levels. Again, cooling was a must to add to the units through mini splits. And they also did some other measures that we can see on the screen there. So again, a great example of replacing aging equipment, reducing operating costs, and utilizing all possible rebates while improving the health benefits of their tenants. Really quickly, we have an example in Hope, Park Street Manor, operated by Mount Hope Senior Citizens Housing Society. This one's interesting because they had the portable window-mounted air conditioners, but they had to, property manager had to install them every summer. And this was becoming a bit taxing with that extra labor. It was inefficient, and they were noticing air leakage around the windows, compromising energy performance and cooling. So through a BC Hydro program, they undertook a level 2 energy study and identified replacing their electric baseboards with mini split heat pumps. We can see in the bottom left a photo of all those units serving tenant units. And looking at the business case, we can see an incredible rebate level. Now I'll mention this was a special offer that was stacked with another, but the regular offer had about $100,000 available for this project. So it's a great reason to connect with BC Nonprofit before starting a project. Because if you order equipment without a funding agreement in place, you become ineligible for funding. So I know we're getting close to our time here. I'm just going to quickly show quick funding pathways that, again, if we go too quick for these, just please reach out to us at BC Nonprofit and we can set up a special meeting and go over each one of these one by one. So starting off with BC Hydro Social Energy Savings Program. It's just a great program that provides amazing levels of rebates for heat pumps. And it's also really great that they have rebates for windows now in there too. We talked about solar today, and BC Hydro for BC Hydro customers has an amazing solar program that really improves the business case for nonprofit housing sites, making this type of measure more accessible. Fortis BC has a program for their gas customers, but more specifically for this conversation, their electric customers. There's heat pump rebates available as well in that program. Clean BC has a program. Now, this is what was used for those townhomes. It's important with rebates, and you can leave that to us at BC Nonprofit, but the building type really comes into it. So if you're a single family home or a townhome, there's different programs that merge. So this program used for Rotarians townhomes provides great funding for some of these items. Now looking quickly at some no-cost items, BC Hydro and Fortis have income qualified a program for customers that is called the Energy Conservation Assistance Program, or ECAP. And so this is only available for single family homes and townhomes, not MURBs. Energy coach from that program will determine which of the items is available at no cost, and all the items through this program are available at no cost. And finally, if you're a client of your regional health authority's home care program or mental health substance use program, you may be eligible for a free portable air conditioner. Now, there's some rules that apply to this, so please be in touch with BC Nonprofit and we can ensure you move through that efficiently. And finally, I'd just like to end with a reminder that affordable housing really is meant to provide a safe, secure, and affordable home for all. Each of these tenants in the photos are from the interior of BC, and they're real people that I met on my audit trip in that region in 2021. Some directly mentioned overheating to me as an issue they'd appreciate support with. I'm happy to say that each single building they reside in has received cooling upgrades through the installation of mini split heat pumps, in addition to other measures. So thank you all for your time, and please reach out to us at BC Nonprofit for support with any of the things that we've talked about today. And with that, I know we have limited time, but we can maybe do some quick questions if there are any in the chat.
Thanks, Edward. So if anyone just wants to, in the last few minutes, speak up. Otherwise, we've got a question in the chat about how can tenants who are not seniors um, sort of start accessing AC. Sorry, I don't know if I understand that question very well.
I think it might be along the free AC units or the discounted AC units. There are eligibility criteria. Um, I can quickly look these up as right now.
Yeah.
BC Hydro, those ones, unfortunately, the free public stream is discontinued. The funding ran out for that. There's currently some through the health authorities, but it's only for existing clients of home health, home support, mental health, and substance use programs. So it's only folks that meet those specific criteria and have assessments to meet the criteria by clinicians in those departments. So unfortunately, it's not as widespread as we would hope. Um, I don't know if there was the Energy Saver program through BC Hydro as well. I heard that there was, I think that was the one I heard
The
there was some folks that got free ACs, but you folks might know better than I do some of those
there are
pathways.
also they do provide BC Hydro do provide $50 off Energy Star window air conditioners and high efficiency portable air conditioners. Now that only runs until the 21st of August, so it's a relatively short window, but those are elements in terms of getting discounts. So, but yes, I see. Thank you, Sarah, for pasting the free portable air conditioners. But yes, if potentially that could be closed right now or what it is, but I know that there's certainly discounts available for air
And
conditioning units.
thanks. And I'm just going to put our contact information up here. So please reach out to energy at bcmpha.ca and we can just help you do a scan because as we mentioned, like with the ECAP program, that's only available to single family homes and not MERBs. So we'd be happy to help you do a scan of your particular building and just ensure that you're maximizing all opportunities.
I think with that, we are going to close out the webinar. Thank you so much to Edward and Megan and Chris for providing the sort of presentation today. It's been very informational. Thank you to Courtney, BC and PHA for hosting this session as well. Please do look out on our schedule for the upcoming sessions. Our next one is on fire preparedness. We've got some phenomenal speakers there, and so we hope to see you all there. We will hang on just for a couple minutes on our end if anyone does want to shoot some questions, but otherwise, thank you very much and have a great day further.